Hello, my name's Janet Henney and I'm an officer with Unite the Union based in the Southeast region. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to claim payments from the government's Insolvency Service if your company has gone into administration and you've consequently been made redundant. We know this is an incredibly difficult and stressful time for those who lose their jobs in this way. It can also be quite a complex time where you're faced with lots of forms to fill in and pieces of information that you need to pull together. We hope that this video is going to help you in that and steer you in the right direction. Now, if your employer has gone into administration, you can claim certain monies from the Insolvency Service, which is underwritten by the government. There are, however, a couple of conditions to be able to do this. You can only claim for monies owed if you are either a UK or EEA national or foreign national with the right to work in the UK, and you must have been an employee of the business. If you fulfill these criteria, there are certain monies that you can claim back via the government, and which monies you can claim will be dependent on your length of service. There are two processes involved in claiming monies owed to you. The first is through a process called the RP1 form. That's Romeo Papa 1 form. And subject to fulfilling the criteria just mentioned of being a UK or EEA national or a foreign national with the right to work in the UK and having been an employee of the business, if you fulfill those criteria, you are able to claim through the RP1 form wages owed, which includes any premiums and overtime, holiday pay up to a maximum of 6 weeks. Now this is pay for holidays which you've accrued but not yet taken. So in your current holiday year, if you've already taken some of your accrued holiday, you need to take that off the calculation if you've already been paid for it. If you haven't yet taken any accrued holiday or not yet been paid for any holiday in the current year, then you can claim up to a maximum of 6 weeks holiday pay. You can also claim any outstanding commission that's owed to you, and then subject to having a minimum of 2 years consecutive employment, and by that I mean 2 years employment where you haven't taken a break, not even a short break, and rejoined the company. It's 2 years consecutive employment. You can also claim statutory redundancy pay. There is then a second process called the RP2 form, that's Romeo Papa 2, through which you can claim notice pay, which you would have been paid under the circumstances of a normal termination. So let's have a look in a little bit more detail at the RP1 form and break down a little bit more what you can claim. The first thing that is really important to note is that the government works with a notional figure of a week's pay. This is currently set at £525 a week. All calculations under government schemes, whether it's for the Insolvency Service, statutory redundancy pay, tribunal payouts, they are all calculated on this notional figure of a week's pay. What that means is if you are paid over £525 a week, then the calculations are capped at 525. So they won't actually be calculated on what you earn, they'll be capped. If you currently earn under £525 a week, the calculations will be done on what your actual earnings are. Really important for you to know that. So, sales and commission will be calculated from company information, but you must provide estimates. So you'll need to provide information on any pay that you have outstanding. So you'll need to check back to your last pay slip that you were paid. Check that it had all of the pay that you were owed for that pay period. Very often when companies go into administration, they've hit cash flow on the way up to that, and you may well have not been paid correctly in your last, who knows, couple of pay slips. Go back and check them, because you need to claim any outstanding wages that you're owed. You'll need to give an estimate for any sales commission. The administrators will be able to provide that information to the government, but you will need to give an estimate of any sales and commission that you're owed. And you'll also need to work out any holidays owed. Now, to do this, you need to know when your holiday year runs. Check that against your diary of what holiday you've taken, and on the basis of when your holiday year runs and whatever date you're putting in your application, you need to work out prorated how much holiday you've accrued, minus any days that you've taken and been paid for. And that will leave you with your outstanding holidays. Bear in mind that the Insolvency Service will only pay out to a maximum of 6 weeks. Now, a few moments ago, I also mentioned that if you have 2 years continuous service, that's 2 years unbroken service, you can also claim statutory redundancy pay through the Insolvency Service. Statutory is a really important word here. You might well have a contractual redundancy scheme that's been negotiated in your workplace that has provision for redundancy pay above and beyond the statutory amounts. Unfortunately, with payments from the Insolvency Service, they will only pay out on statutory, not on your contractual figure. Again, the notional pay cap is applied to statutory redundancy pay calculations. How this works, you will get half a week's pay for each full year of service up to the age of 22. You'll get 1 week's pay for each full year of service that you were over the age of 22, under the age of 41. So let me just recap that for you. So for every full year of service that you are under 22, you'll get half a week's pay. For every full year of service that you are 22 or older but under 41, you'll get 1 week's pay. And for every full year of service that you are 41 or older, you'll get 1.5 weeks pay. Now, this is quite a difficult calculation to do because not only do you have to work out your length of service, you have to work out how old you were at different points. Let me give you a quick takeaway tip on this one. If you go online to the government's website, which is gov.uk, and in the search bar type in redundancy calculator, it'll come up with a calculator that all you'll need to put in is your rate of pay, your normal pay, your age and your length of service. Press the button and it will work all of that calculation out for you. Much easier than trying to do it yourself. The other thing that you need to know, in addition to the notional week's pay, the other thing that you need to know in terms of statutory redundancy calculation is that it's capped at 20 years length of service. So if you've got 21 years, 22 years and so on, you won't get additional payment for those years. It's capped at 20 years. Consequently, because of this formula on age and cap of years service and cap of the notional week's pay, the maximum statutory redundancy pay you can actually get is £15,750. That would be the maximum for somebody who has 20 years service, earns the cap or above, and has served all of those years service in that upper age bracket. If you're really not sure how to calculate your normal week's pay because you've been, for example, on maternity leave or on long-term sick leave, when you've been on a prorated proportion of your pay, all you need to do is go back to the period prior to that leave. So the period prior to the maternity leave or the period prior to the long-term sick. And you work out an average for the 12 weeks going backwards from your last normal pay slip. So you go back to the last normal pay slip you had before you went on whichever kind of leave you've been on, and you work out the average for the 12 weeks. So if you're weekly paid, you take the 12 weeks running up to that, add all of those payments together and divide by 12 to give you the average. If you're monthly paid, you take the 3 months pay slips prior to going on that leave, add those 3 months together, divide by 3 to give you your average monthly pay. So we've had a look at wages owed. Don't forget to include any premiums and any overtime that you worked. So wages owed for work undertaken but not yet paid. Holiday pay up to a maximum of 6 weeks, accrued, not yet taken or not yet paid. Commission, and for those entitled because they've got 2 years consecutive service, also statutory redundancy pay. Next, we're just going to have a look at the information that you'll need to hand in order to complete your RP1 form. So when you're ready to complete your RP1 form, my best advice is to have all of the information with you. Get yourself a folder, start farming the information that you're going to need. Keep it all in that folder and have that with you at the point at which you're going to complete the RP1 form, and especially so if you're going to be doing it online. So the first thing that you're going to need is a CN number. It's the case reference number. So CN, case reference N number. And this is issued by the administrator. So the administrator will write to you formally advising that the company's gone into administration and that you have been made redundant. And in that letter, there will be a case reference number, and you will need that in order to complete the RP1 form. If you haven't had the case reference number from your administrator yet, please do get in touch with them and ask them to forward that on to you, because you can't start the process until you have that CN number. The second thing that you're going to need is your national insurance number. Now, if you don't know this, there's lots of ways that you can find out. The most simple is through any of your pay slips. Your national insurance number should be on your pay slips. You need an email address. Now, this is really important. if you don't have your own private email address, set one up. There are a whole host of platforms that you can do this from. I won't recommend any particular one, but you need an email address, and you need to check that email address frequently, because there will be communication coming back into it, and you will need to do something with that. You'll need your bank or building society details, including the sort code and account number. And this will be so that you can be paid by the Insolvency Service. The money will be paid direct into your bank account. You'll need the effective date of redundancy, and again that can be confirmed by the administrators. Your employment details, including the dates that you were employed, so the date you started your employment and the date that the redundancy was affected, and how much you were paid. Details of any other money that you're owed by your employer. Now, we've already covered things like, wages owed, premiums and overtimes, but don't forget also, if you had any expense claims in, if you had necessary business expenditure, and you had an expense claim in the system that hadn't yet been settled for you, you need to claim any money that the company still owed you. We've covered the claiming of holidays. You'll need all of that information too. So you'll need to know the number of days that you were entitled to, so how much you'd currently accrued, and the number of days that you had already taken, so that the balance that's left over is what you're owed. You will also need to list any money that you still owe your employer. This will be deducted if you had taken, for example, a season ticket loan, or if your employer had a scheme to assist you to purchase a push bike, many do, and you still had money that you owe them, you need to list that. So I'm going to run through that again quickly, just so that you have that full list of information that you're going to need. So you need your CN, your case reference number. This is issued by the administrator. If you haven't had it yet, chase them up for it. Your national insurance number, an email address, your bank or building society account number and sort code, the date you became redundant, your employment details, including the date when you started your employment, and how much you were paid. Details of any other money that you're owed by your employer, the number of holiday days that you're owed, and lastly, details of anything that you still owe to your employer. You can complete all of that online, and when you complete that form, you'll notice that there's a tick box on there asking if you would also like to claim notice pay. It is really important that you tick that box if you want to claim your notice pay. If you don't tick that box, you won't be able to do it. And in a moment, we'll go through the process and explain why that is. But just to recap on the RP1 form, double check your figures, make sure that you've put in all of the information that they're asking you to, make sure you've got your CN number in there, and make sure that you tick the notice pay box. Once you've submitted the RP1 form, your application will then be in process with the Insolvency Service to cover the monies owed to you by your employer, and if you're entitled, the statutory redundancy pay. Now, at the end of that session of talking about the RP1, I emphasised quite clearly that if you want to claim notice pay, you really do need to tick the box to state that you want to claim notice pay. The other thing that I really emphasised was the need to have a working email address. that you check frequently. Now, those two things tie together. So, when you submit the RP1 form, if you have ticked the box to say that you want to claim notice pay, then you will automatically get an email with the RP2 form. It'll be automatically generated and the RP2 form will be emailed to you by the Insolvency Service. So you can see the importance of that email address. You need to check that email address and check for that RP2 email coming in. Once it comes in, you'll need to respond to that, and there's a few things that you need to know. You can only apply for your notice pay via this email link. This is why I've emphasised both the ticking of the box and setting up the email address as being absolutely critical. You must reply to that link in order to make that claim. You must complete the RP2 form and return it in order to get your notice pay. Again, the notional week's pay is capped at £525, so your notice pay will be calculated in the same way as all other government payments, with a cap at £525 if indeed you earned more than that, or your actual earnings if they were lower than £525. Now, the RP2 payment for your notice pay is paid out separately to the monies calculated in the RP1 payment. The RP2 payment is made at the end of what would have been your notice period. So there'll be two separate payments. And there are a couple of deductions that the Insolvency Service will make. So we just need to run through what they are. If you secure alternative employment during what would have been that notice period, so for example, if it would have been 4 weeks notice or 8 weeks notice, or whatever the notice period was, if you secured employment during that time, they will write off any of the earnings that you've had against that notice pay. So just as a random example for illustration, if you were owed £2,000 notice pay, but you secured alternative employment and during what would have been the notice period earned £1,500, the Insolvency Service will only pay you the £500. If you don't secure alternative employment, the Insolvency Service will deduct automatically a figure equivalent to job seekers allowance for the notice period. The reason for this is that they will expect you to mitigate your losses. Now what that means is basically they expect you to do whatever you can to reduce the loss of your income, and part of our expectation will be for you to claim job seekers allowance. Whether or not you actually do that is irrelevant. They will deduct the money in any event. So if they're going to deduct it, you may as well go and claim job seekers allowance in the meantime. But just be aware, even if you did not claim job seekers allowance, they will still deduct the equivalent amount from your notice period because of the expectation of mitigation. So just to recap on the RP2 form, the RP2 form, that's Romeo Papa 2 form, covers and addresses notice pay. You can only make the claim for notice pay if you have ticked the correct box on the RP1 form. The ticking of that box on the RP1 form generates an automated email which will have the RP2 form in it. You must complete and return that RP2 form in order to get your notice pay, calculated with the notional cap of £525 a week, and they will deduct any earnings earned during what would have been the notice period, and if there are no earnings, they will deduct the equivalent amount of job seekers allowance for that period in any event. The last piece of information to add is it can be incredibly complex knowing which elements of your pay you can include and which you can't. If you have a salaried job where you don't have overtime rates, etc., and you earn the same amount every month, then that would be straightforward. There are, however, lots of jobs out there which really aren't simple. Jobs like cabin crew, where you've got lots of shift premiums, etc. If you're really not sure what to include, please do talk to your Unite Regional Officer. They're the people who can really help you look at your particular circumstance and tell you what you can include and what you can't. If they don't know the answer themselves immediately, they can find out. So please use your regional officer to support you in this. And finally, it just leaves for me to say that I am incredibly sorry to hear that you're in this situation. It's been a really tough time across lots of industries, with many jobs in the region going to administration. I hope that what we've gone through today at least steers you in the right direction for claiming some money from the Insolvency Service and has been some use to you. Good luck.